Imagine losing your job for helping someone. That's exactly what happened to Tasha. But what came after? Pure karma. It all started with a simple act of kindness. The kind most people wouldn't even think twice about. But for Tasha Williams, it was just who she was. She had been working at the Bayview Grill, an upscale waterfront restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, for nearly 3 years. The kind of place where the lobster tail was plated like artwork, and the wine list was longer than the menu itself. Tasha had seen all kinds of customers walk through those glass doors, tourists flashing their expensive watches, business execs who barely acknowledged the waitstaff, and regulars who snapped their fingers when they needed more water. She had learned to deal with them all, but that night was different. The dinner rush had just started to settle when an older man walked in. He didn't fit the usual crowd. His jacket was wrinkled, his shirt a little too big, his shoes well worn but clean. He glanced around, hesitant, as if he wasn't sure if he even belonged there. Tasha noticed how the other servers glanced at him, then looked away. No one wanted to take his table. That usually meant one thing: they assumed he wouldn't tip well. She sighed, adjusting her apron before walking over. "Hey there, sir. How you doing tonight?" she asked with a warm smile. The man looked up, his expression a mix of relief and gratitude. Good, I guess. I've never been here before." Tasha handed him a menu. "Well, you're in for a treat. Do you need any recommendations?" He nodded slowly, eyes scanning the overpriced entrees. "Yeah, what's good here?" She chuckled. "Honestly, everything. But if you're looking for something solid, I'd go with the shrimp and grits. Classic low country style, full of flavor." The man hesitated, his fingers tapping the edge of the menu. "And, how much is just a coffee?" Tasha's heart sank just a little. She'd seen this before. Someone coming in, hoping to enjoy a meal, only to realize it was out of their budget. She leaned in slightly. "You know what? The shrimp and grits are on special tonight," she said casually. "Half off. And I'll throw in that coffee for you, no charge." His eyes flicked up to hers, surprised. "You don't have to do that." Tasha shrugged. "I know, but I want to." She walked away before he could argue. But what she didn't know was that this moment, this small, seemingly insignificant act, was about to change her life forever. But the next morning, she would wake up to a reality she never saw coming. Tasha moved through the restaurant like she always did, effortlessly balancing plates, keeping an eye on her tables, making sure every customer felt like they mattered. But every now and then she'd glance over at the man she had just helped. He sat quietly at his corner table, stirring his coffee more than drinking it. When his shrimp and grits arrived, he took small bites, savoring each one, like someone who didn't take a hot meal for granted. She couldn't help but wonder what his story was. A businessman down on his luck? A widower who didn't get out much? Or maybe just someone who wanted to feel normal for a night? Whatever it was, Tasha didn't pry. She had always believed that kindness wasn't about getting answers. It was just about doing the right thing. As the night went on, she checked in on him, making sure he had everything he needed. Unlike most of the high-end clientele, he always thanked her, always looked her in the eye. When he was done, he carefully placed a few bills on the table and stood up. "Thank you, miss. You didn't have to do what you did." Tasha smiled. "I know, but I hope you enjoyed your meal." He gave her a small nod and walked out the door. And that was supposed to be the end of it. But something about the way her manager, Chris Dunbar, stared after the man made her uneasy. His usual smug expression was gone, replaced by something else, something calculating. Chris was the kind of boss who never missed a chance to remind the staff who was in charge. He ran the Bayview Grill like a drill sergeant, and if you made a mistake, he made sure you paid for it. Tasha had never been on his bad side before, until now. She noticed him flipping through the security footage at the host stand, rewinding and rewatching her interaction with the older man. His jaw tightened as he picked up his phone and walked into the back office. Tasha's stomach sank, but she pushed the feeling aside. She hadn't done anything wrong. Right? The rest of her shift went by in a blur. By the time she clocked out, the restaurant was quiet, the last of the dinner guests long gone. She grabbed her things, ready to head home and forget about the strange way Chris had been acting. But as she walked past the office, she heard him talking to someone on the phone. "She broke protocol," he muttered. "Gave away food. That's money out of my pocket. I don't care what the situation was. She's done here." Tasha froze. It took a second for the words to register. Done here. Her heart pounded as she backed away from the door. She wanted to barge in, to demand an explanation, but what was the point? Chris had already made up his mind. She had no idea how bad the next morning was going to be. But when she walked into work the next day, everything would come crashing down. Tasha barely slept that night. She kept replaying Chris's words in her head, hoping she had misheard, that maybe he was just blowing off steam. But the next morning, the uneasy feeling in her gut only grew stronger. She walked into the Bayview Grill right on time, like always. The scent of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air, the usual morning prep underway. But something felt off. The other servers avoided eye contact. The hostess, Brianna, gave her a tight-lipped look before quickly turning back to her podium. Before Tasha could even clock in, Chris's voice cut through the restaurant. "Tasha, office, now." The way he said it, flat, final, made her stomach drop. She forced herself to keep her head high as she followed him, but the moment she stepped inside his cramped office, she knew. A termination notice was already printed and waiting on his desk. Chris leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. His usual smirk was gone. "You know why you're here," he said. Tasha's throat tightened, but she refused to let him see her break. "No, actually I don't." He exhaled sharply, shaking his head like she was an idiot. "You gave away free food. That's theft. That's company policy. I don't care how nice you were trying to be. That's not how we run things here." Her hands clenched into fists. "I paid for his coffee myself." Chris scoffed. "And the meal? You told him it was half off. That's lying to a customer, misleading them into thinking they were getting a deal. You made a call that wasn't yours to make. That's money out of my pocket." Tasha could feel the heat rising to her face. "You really think this place is going to go broke over one plate of shrimp and grits?" Chris's expression hardened. "It's not about the food. It's about you thinking you can do whatever you want." He shoved the termination paper toward her. "You're done here." Her fingers trembled as she picked up the paper. "After 3 years? Just like that?" He didn't even blink. "Just like that." Tasha's head swam. 3 years of double shifts, of covering for people when they called out, of smiling through rude customers and endless stress. Gone. Just because she showed a little kindness. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Chris exactly what she thought of him, of this whole damn place. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. So she swallowed the lump in her throat, grabbed her bag, and walked out. The moment she stepped outside, the cold morning air hit her like a slap. She stared at the crumpled termination paper in her hand, the reality sinking in. She was unemployed. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and she had no backup plan. But what she didn't know was that someone had been watching, and her story was far from over. Far. Tasha sat in her tiny studio apartment staring at the ceiling. She should have been looking for new jobs, updating her resume, doing something, anything. But all she could do was replay the morning in her head. Every time she thought about Chris's smug face, her blood boiled. She had given 3 years to that place, never called out, picked up extra shifts, Treated every customer with respect, even when they didn't deserve it. And for what? She sighed, rubbing her temples. She needed to focus. Bills didn't stop just because life knocked you down. But before she could even open her laptop, her phone buzzed. It was Brianna, the hostess from work. "Girl, you need to check Facebook. Now." Tasha frowned, clicking the link Brianna sent. And there it was. A post from a customer, someone she didn't even know, talking about her firing. The caption read, "A waitress at the Bayview Grill got fired for being kind. Y'all, this is insane. Read this." The post detailed everything. How she helped a struggling customer. How she got fired the next day. How the restaurant's manager, Chris, had a reputation for treating his staff like garbage. The comments were blowing up. "This is disgusting. How do you fire someone for being a decent human? Boycott the Bayview Grill. That manager needs to be fired, not her. Where is she now? Someone give this girl a job ASAP." Tasha's heart pounded. She had never been the center of attention like this. Then another message popped up. It was from a local news reporter. "Hi Tasha, I'm with WCSC Live 5 News. Your story is gaining a lot of attention. We'd love to interview you. Please let us know if you're open to talking." Tasha sat back, exhaling sharply. This was getting bigger than she ever expected. She didn't want to be on the news. She didn't want to be a viral sensation. She just wanted her job back. Or at least, to not feel like she had been tossed aside like nothing. But then, another message came in. This one stopped her cold. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, direct. "You don't know me, but I know exactly what happened at that restaurant. Can we talk? It's important." Tasha's stomach flipped. Who was this? And how did they know? Something bigger was going on, and she was about to find out just how deep it went. Tasha's hands hovered over her phone. She didn't know whether to respond to the unknown number or just ignore it, but something about the message unsettled her. Finally, she typed back, "Who is this?" The reply came almost instantly. "Meet me at the Daily Grind Cafe in an hour. You'll want to hear this." Tasha hesitated, but curiosity won. She grabbed her keys and headed out. The Daily Grind was a small coffee shop tucked between a laundromat and a thrift store. When she walked in, she spotted a man sitting near the window, sipping on a black coffee. He looked up as she approached. "Tasha?" She nodded slowly. "And you are?" The man set down his cup. "My name is Robert Hale. I'm the CEO of Hale Hospitality Group. We own the Bayview Grill." Her breath caught in her throat. The owner of the entire restaurant chain, sitting in front of her? "I was the man you served that night," he continued. "The one you helped." Tasha's mind reeled. She stared at him, trying to make sense of it. "That was you?" He nodded. "I was doing an undercover evaluation. I visit my restaurants from time to time, posing as a regular guest. I like to see how my employees treat people when they don't think anyone important is watching." Tasha's heart pounded. Robert exhaled, shaking his head. "You were the only server who treated me with respect that night. You took time to explain the menu. You didn't judge me. And when I hesitated over a cup of coffee, you showed kindness. That meant something to me." Tasha swallowed, still processing everything. "Then why did Chris fire me?" Robert's jaw tightened. "Because he didn't know who I was. He only saw a server who, in his eyes, broke the rules. He made a decision based on power and control. And that decision just cost him his job." Tasha blinked. "Wait, what?" Robert leaned forward. "I saw the news, the social media outrage. The way people rallied behind you. That's not the kind of attention we want associated with our brand. Chris was a liability. I fired him this morning. Tasha sat back, stunned. I'm not here just to tell you that, Robert continued. I'm here because I want to offer you a job. She stared at him. A job? He nodded. Not as a waitress. As a manager. And not just that. I want to cover your tuition if you're interested in restaurant management. I read about your dream of opening your own place someday. Tasha's eyes burned. She had told that to only a few people. She never thought anyone actually listened. I don't understand, she whispered. Why are you doing this? Robert smiled. Because kindness matters. You proved that. And I want people like you leading my restaurants. Tasha swallowed hard, trying to keep her emotions in check. Just 24 hours ago, she thought she had lost everything. Now, everything had changed. But this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about proving that doing the right thing always matters. Tasha sat in her car for a long time after leaving the cafe, staring at the job offer in her hands. Just yesterday, she had walked out of the Bayview Grill humiliated, unsure of how she was going to pay rent. Now, she had a management position waiting for her. It still didn't feel real. She thought about everything that had happened, how one small act of kindness had nearly cost her everything, but also ended up being the reason she was getting a second chance. A few days later, she walked back into the Bayview Grill, but this time, not as a waitress. The staff looked up as she stepped inside. Some gasped. A few whispered. And then there was Brianna, the hostess who had tipped her off about the viral post. Wait, you're back? Brianna asked, eyes wide. Tasha grinned. Yeah, but not how you think. Just then, Robert Hale stepped out of the office. All employees, can I have your attention? He called out. The room fell silent. As of today, the Bayview Grill is under new management. He turned to Tasha. And your new general manager is standing right here. A ripple of shock spread through the room. A few servers clapped. Others just gawked. Chris was nowhere in sight. Tasha took a deep breath and stepped forward. She wasn't just here for a promotion. She was here to change the way this place operated. No more toxic leadership. No more punishing people for being decent human beings. Later that evening, as she locked up the restaurant, she thought about her journey. She had gone from being fired to being in charge. But more importantly, she had learned something valuable. Sometimes, doing the right thing comes at a cost. But in the end, it's always worth it. Because kindness has a way of coming full circle. How would you have handled Tasha's situation? Have you ever been punished for doing the right thing? Let us know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. It just might inspire someone else to stand up for what's right.